Hello and welcome to episode 4 of my journey to awakening and abundance. It's nice to have you here. I'm here in the car in a beautiful woodland setting with my husband Jonathan, as usual, and we're about to kick off. Where did we get to last time?
We got to why people were coming.
Oh yeah, I did find that people were coming back to me for the wisdom sometimes, not just the healing, but quite often coming back because they wanted to hear more advice, receive more wisdom from the field. So yeah, there was a lot going on in that time actually, I think at that point, I don't know whether I've said this already, but at that point I did start to think I've got to find a way to teach these guys to connect to them, connect themselves, so that I don't have to keep connecting just to get their wisdom. They can do it themselves because we're all the same. One thing I knew for sure, even though my clients thought that these gifts were reserved for certain people, I knew, and I used to say it openly, no, they're definitely not reserved. Anybody can do this because it's a human condition. You can call it a gift if you want, and maybe it is, but it's a gift that every single modern human has. So all human beings living on this planet today have exactly the same gifts, the same innate wisdom. It's built into our DNA. It's built into our DNA. So I knew that anybody could do it. And I was really keen as well to start teaching people how, because I just knew that that's what they needed.
I guess as well, also to shortcut some of what you went through. I mean, from my perspective, I saw the amount of work you and research and learning that you were doing.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's not kind of reasonable with people with families and jobs and stuff that
Oh no, I was
everybody
really lucky.
could do that.
Yeah.
They might be able to.
Yeah.
There's no difference between people, but
Yeah.
how did that play into what you did next?
I mean, I was really lucky. Lucky and unlucky all at the same time. So I was lucky because I was at home. I didn't have to work full time. I chose my hours. Although I had our son and, he was still at school. And so, there was still that work to do, that raising to do. I could choose my work hours as well. So I had much more flexibility than someone who's working, full time out of the house every day. So I was lucky in that respect. But at the same time, that period for me wasn't without challenge. In 2018, in April 2018, your dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. That was really difficult. He was in denial for much of his illness, which lasted a year and a half. Also, a month later, our son had a major mountain bike accident that resulted in a brain injury that wasn't picked up. And that led to so many difficulties for him and also for us. And I will do I think we'll do a separate podcast on that, because it wasn't until years later that I'd listened to a podcast by Jill Bolte Taylor that I realised that his words really, he said at the time, he's always said that was the day he died. He died that day, and that he knew he had to carry on his life in the same body, but he knew he wasn't the same guy. It's a really deep subject, so I can't really cover it all in this particular episode, but I will cover this subject because it's interesting, if nothing else. And we had a lot to overcome during that period. But years later, I was listening to a podcast by Jill Bolte Taylor, who was a lady who had a massive stroke, brain injury, in exactly the same position as our son's brain injury. And what really drew my attention to this woman, I was just about to turn off the TED Talk, and she suddenly said, I died that day. I knew I had to carry on in this body, but I wasn't the same person. And they were the exact words that our son had been saying for all of those years. And that really sparked something with me. But I'll talk about his accident in a later episode. But, it wasn't an uneventful time for us. It was a really difficult time for us as well, and for me in particular. Dealing with your dad's illness, and I was really close to your dad, and hit all of the sadness involved in that, and his he really didn't want to die, and I also felt really frustrated because now I had all of this knowledge. I knew that all of these people could self-heal, but I hadn't formulated a methodology by then. I hadn't found a way to bring all of this together into one course that would teach people how to do it. So I was sad, struggling on my own journey, trying to stay super present, super self-aware, trying to help the people that were in trouble in our lives, like our son and your dad, and my sister. My sister was unwell as well at the time. Her cancer had come back. So, her cancer had spread actually. So all of these things were going on at the same time as I was trying to understand myself, change myself, like grow myself and my modality. I was still doing healings. All of this was going on at the same time.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? I mean, these were specifics for us and for you that were going on, but this is normal life. Everybody has incidents, and be they major or illness or
just life.
Routine.
Yeah, actually, it's true. Like, I think of a couple of people actually that come to mind. I had a couple of clients that made some really impactful statements to me, actually. One of them was a lady that went on to do all of my courses, actually. But she'd said to me, she used to come to me every month, and she'd say to me, I feel like a train and life derails me. And every time I derail, I come and see you. And this treatment for me, the work that you do, is like you just pick me up and put me back on the track, and I can merrily go about my life again. So it's almost like I derail every month, and every time I derail, you put me back on the track and I can get on with my life again. I find clarity and strength to be able to go on with my life again. That was fundamental for me, that statement. She used to say it to me often. And the other one was someone who was... So that's a prime example of how it doesn't have to be a major event. It doesn't have to be a majorly traumatic event. Life itself is very, very busy. Life is busy, overwhelming, and hard. And that's the thing that we can change, incidentally. But it's hard for most people. Our society requires you to strive, work, get the next best thing, get the next big thing. That's how we're trained, if you like. And you get so busy doing that, it takes up all of your energy and all of your hours, and you have zero time to work on yourself. So you have to go to someone else, someone outside of you, to put you back on your tracks. The other person was someone who had recently experienced grief, and she came to see me for healing. And the brilliant thing was I'd done a couple of healings on her, and she said to me one day, I love coming to see you because it's like going to therapy and not having to speak. That was another very telling thing for me. Not everybody wants to share their thoughts and emotions and feelings, which to me just cemented, again, that I have to teach people to do this for themselves without having to tell everybody about it, without having to talk about their problems all of the time, because people don't always want to talk about their issues. They just want to work on their issues quietly themselves.
I think the other coincidence that happened here was this was 2020.
Yeah, 2020, we all know what happened. So suddenly I couldn't do face-to-face healings. This was major, actually. This was a massive, a very telling time, and I think for society as a whole, because what happened there is that not being able to do the face-to-face treatments meant that people could no longer come to me. People now had to rely on themselves. They had to rely on their own resolve to get them through. This was really good though, because it meant that I had some time now, or I thought I had some time now, where I could take a step back and start developing the course, because there was less pressure on me to do face-to-face because I couldn't do it. So I thought, right, now's the time for me to develop a series of workshops where I can teach people how to do this for themselves. So I already had that in my mind, but unfortunately my sister became really quite sick, and her cancer had really spread, and It was a very difficult time. So my other sister, the remaining one, and myself decided that we were to help her. We were going to help her through this process. And so throughout 2020 and 2021, we spent a lot of time with our dying sister, actually, and through the pandemic helped her through her illness to her last days, to her transition, and we were there for her transition. Personally, for me, apart from it being a very difficult time, and a time of great grieving, because watching someone you love deteriorate that way, particularly when they're young, is very difficult indeed. But also for me, it added to that frustration again, where I knew everything I knew, but I hadn't quite formulated it into a course that people could do. So that was always playing at the back of my mind, and it added to my grief. It actually added to my grief in a way, just all of these events that were occurring, and I knew that I could help, but I felt helpless at the same time. So that was a major driver then for me to start developing these courses. And once my sister had passed away in 2021, I did two things. One was I decided I needed to do something creative. So I took it upon myself to decorate our whole house. Do you remember? I just decided I was going to decorate the whole house. I was going to do all the painting myself. I was going to do it all myself. I didn't want anyone to help me. I wanted to do it. I don't know, like, it's mad, isn't it? It's such a lot of work. It's not easy to decorate a house, though, but I decided to do it. I needed to do it. And actually, I will say that if you're going through any kind of mental health issue or grief or stress, the best thing you can do for yourself is embark on a creative project. I don't necessarily recommend decorating your entire house, but I do recommend doing something really, really creative. Learn a new craft and do it, because it brings presence. It makes you get really, really present, and that presence leads to self-awareness, and it's such a good thing to do. So as well as decorating the house, I decided that I was going to put together some courses. I had sufficient information. I felt confident. I felt really confident in my own abilities, in my own growth, and I felt confident in everything that I knew, that I would be able to put together a course or two to help people do this work for themselves.
And if I remember rightly, I think the first things you did there were a couple of workshops. Do you want to kind of describe
Oh yeah, I
those?
put together, God, I'd nearly forgotten actually what I put together at the beginning. Yeah, I put together two workshops. One was the change workshop. I developed a zone method. So the way for us to change our behaviours and how to become more self-aware, you need method. There needs to be a method involved in that process. What needs to change is your behaviour, your patterns, your habitual behaviour. So I put together the zone method, which basically helped you understand what zone you were in. It's difficult to understand what your frequency is. So the way that you change and the way that you bring about the life that you want is you match the frequency of that which you want. But it's difficult to know how to do that. So we all understand the words, but very few of us know how to actually do it. Just find a better feeling thought just wasn't cutting it. It doesn't cut it. That's why so many people think the law of attraction doesn't work. They try it, their frequency changes slightly. Now, the reason it changes slightly at the beginning is because they've understood the process. They understand that if you find a better feeling thought, that makes you feel better, which raises your vibration. So they understand it, which initially that's where the excitement comes from. Oh, wow, this stuff works. And you start to see some synchronicities, like, people always start with the parking fairy or something like that. I know I'm going to find a parking space. Bang, you find a parking space, because it does work. You get into the frequency of free parking spaces. It's not rocket science. Like, I know I talk about it very matter of fact, and that's because that's my life now. But the truth is, people used to start doing it and then lose their way because there wasn't enough depth to what they were doing. So I developed a methodology that provided the depth. It told you every day what you needed to do. So I developed these 2 workshops. The first one was how you're going to change, how you're going to identify your frequency, get into a higher frequency, what that involved. There were steps involved in doing that. And it was also providing the clients with enough knowledge about who we are, how the universe works, everything I'd learned from Bruce Lipton on epigenetics, how your thoughts impact your personal frequency. And I just brought all of that together into one change course, how you can change your frequency, your personality, and your life. How you start to become self-aware enough to understand your actions and reactions and what the impact of those are on your life. Most people don't understand that. And those that do understand it don't know how to put it into practice. So that initial workshop, the change workshop, was designed to help you put it into practice. Now, I found that people came to do the workshop, and it was a 3-hour workshop, and they'd leave completely elated. They thought it was fantastic. They were all on a high. For 2 or 3 days, they'd do the work, and then they'd fall off the wagon. The same as all the other people that had ever tried any law of attraction type work before, any manifestation work before. They start off really well, then they fall off the wagon. So I realised that they'd need more than that. A 3-hour workshop wasn't going to cut it. No matter how good the information was, they had to find a way to stay focused and stay disciplined through the process. It takes at least 3 weeks, at least 21 days to develop a new habit. So I thought, a 3-hour workshop's definitely not going to cut it. I started running WhatsApp groups. So there was only ever 5 or 6 participants at each of the workshops because I did them at home, and that was the size of the room that we were doing it in. So I started running WhatsApp groups for each of the groups that came to do the workshops. And the WhatsApp groups where people could talk about what they were struggling with, I would give them motivation on a daily basis. Then once a week we'd have a Zoom call. Now, all of this was fine initially, but then I also realised that if people weren't doing the work, they just didn't bother showing up to the Zoom call. So it meant that there was still a part of them that was resisting doing the work or kept falling off the wagon. And I thought, well, I can't, how else can I do this? And all my clients kept saying, I wish I could just put you in my pocket. I wish I could put you in my pocket, or just move in with you for a couple of months, and then I'd know everything you know, and I'd be able to do it. I won't fall off the wagon. That was really important, that piece of information for me as well, because that later led to my app, which is where I am now. But so I developed that. I had about 7 groups running on the change workshop. I also developed a healing workshop. And I did say to people it was important they did the change workshop first, because the change workshop explains why we get sick. It explains how you create your life, including your health. So the change workshop explained why we got sick. And then the healing workshop explained how you can heal and how you can stay healed and how you can stay balanced. So it included self-healing, the meditation work, how to self-heal, all the stuff that I was doing on the couch, holding them in a meditation. I just explained all of that and took them through the meditations for that as well, and how the energy centers of your body work, the chakras work, why they need to be aligned, what happens if they're blocked or overactive. The healing workshop covered all of that. And I found people had come to the healing workshop and they were brilliant. They'd do the meditations, they'd absolutely love it. Again, do it for 2 or 3 days, then stop doing it, just fall off the wagon. Life got in the way, they went into overwhelm all over again. And even if they were having, WhatsApp calls and Zoom calls after that, they were still reliant upon themselves to have the discipline to work on themselves every day. The discipline was the difficult part. So that then gave me another challenge. What was I going to do next? How was I going to get people disciplined enough to do this work for themselves without having to have hundreds of groups on WhatsApp? Because I was becoming exhausted as well. I was still doing the healings because I'd started up the healings again. As soon as the lockdowns were lifted, I started doing healings again. So I was still doing the healings. I was now running about 8 or 9 WhatsApp groups and Zoom calls, 8 or 9 Zoom calls a week as well. It was a lot. So then I thought, actually, I'm going to reach burnout really quickly. I can't make this work like this. So something had to give.
So in terms of or what happened next, where did you take that what you've described, and then where did that go?
Well, there was a lot going on, wasn't there? Like with the lockdowns had been lifted. What did happen after that whole lockdown thing is that mental health was massively on the rise. Massively. All of a sudden, we had a society that was really struggling. Male suicides were on the rise. Mental health was on the rise. All aspects of it. Anxiety became huge, like a huge thing. So then there was, all of that to think about as well. Plus, where was I? I had all of this work to do, all of these workshops running, all of these clients either doing really well or falling off the wagon. There's two things to consider here. Like I always used to say, those of you that want it really badly, you have to want the change more than what you've got now. That's the first thing. But even people who want the change have a resistance to doing it themselves. There's two types of client, I realise. There's the client that comes to you and says, I really, really want to change. You do it. They want you to do it for them. And, the reason this is called personal development is because you have to do it yourself. Nobody can do it for you. Like, nobody is creating your life. You're creating it yourself. And nobody can create it. So you have to do the work yourself. Nobody can do it for you. So I very quickly realised that there were two types of clients. Those that would come to you, they're happy to throw money at you, thinking that you're going to do the work for them, and they're going to change as a result of what you do. And that's not going to happen. And the other type of client is the one that says, yeah, I really, really want to do it, but they need guidance on a daily basis to stick with it. So they want to do it, they're happy to do it, but they can't do it on their own.
And there's possibly a third of the information addict. So they are happy to learn things, but don't take accountability or discipline of implementing anything.
I think that's a byproduct, honestly, because that happened to me. I became an information addict, didn't I? I spent 2 years just soaking up information. I think it's really easy to become an information addict. So I have got people that have been successful on the course, but they have got stuck. You will slow your process. You'll slow your progress if you become an information addict and not do the rest of the work. So it's really easy to get caught up in the information. And actually, it happened to me, and I'm a woman, but this happens more to men than women. I find that the men that do my courses are the ones that are more likely to become information addicts and halt their progress. It's interesting, and I don't really know why. It might be something to do with the masculine and feminine energies, but it is interesting how more men are drawn to information addiction, are more prone to information addiction than women. But it's not always the case because I'm a woman and I fell into that trap. The good news is, and I did have a client say this to me, and I think it's on one of the testimonials, is that, I did do that. I did make that mistake. And actually now anybody doing my course is benefiting from my experience. One of my clients said to me, I feel like you've done all the hard work and I've just jumped on at the end and I'm reaping all the benefits. I've cheated. Of course, she hasn't cheated, but she's not making the same mistakes that I did. And so her progress is much faster than mine because she hasn't spent 2 years gathering information. She's actually put what I'm teaching into practice. But that there was that part there that made me realise, even though people were doing these workshops, I was getting busier. They still needed daily guidance. The daily guidance was the thing that I had to tackle next.
Okay, that's great. And that's maybe a time to call this one to a pause.
I think it's a good pause.
And we can come back next time with what happened next.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So this has been episode 4 of My Journey to Awakening and Abundance. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Again, please, if there's any questions you have or any comments you'd like to make, please leave it in the comments. We will look at the comments. Your questions, if they're big enough to warrant their own little series or even just a YouTube video, I will answer it in the form of a video. and it will help you answer your question and also help others in the process. So we do appreciate all comments and we will look at them. Thanks for listening.